What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, before I get into this video, I want to remind you guys, as always, if you're watching and listening to this video and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to Too Raw for TV. If you haven't hit the notification button, please hit that notification button so that you'll be notified of any and every video that drops on my channel as soon as it drops. And also, if you like or at least appreciate the content on my channel, please hit that like button. That'll help not only my channel, but other channels in the LDBC that you are subscribed to be that much better. The Lions Den basketball community. If you want to show love for Too Raw for TV, you want to support Too Raw for TV if you can do so via the PayPal or the Cash App. And also you can support Too Raw for TV on the Patreon. On the Patreon for only $2 per month, you could support Too Raw for TV on the Patreon and maybe talk about stuff that I can't talk about on the YouTube forum. Politics, social issues, controversial topics. Totally Too Raw, totally uncensored for only $2 per month. Now, in this video, I want to talk about Gregg Popovich, all right? This isn't me trying to diss Gregg Popovich in any way, shape, or form, but you have to call a spade sometimes. And let's be honest. When was the last time the San Antonio Spurs have been a contending team? Like truly a contending team when it pertains to the NBA championship. When the San Antonio Spurs had their run, that 20-year run of dominance, which entailed 5 NBA championships, and multiple NBA final appearances, Gregg Popovich got a lot of the credit. You heard the media laud the Popovich system and gave it most of the credit for their dominance and their championships. But you notice that they haven't been giving Gregg Popovich, any of the blame or criticizing him for the Spurs' mediocrity over the past couple of seasons. And in my opinion, it might be time for the San Antonio Spurs and Gregg Popovich to part ways. And this isn't necessarily trying to lessen his stature as a coach. I think he's a very good coach. But I think more credit should have been given out to David Robinson, Tim Duncan, of course, Kawhi Leonard, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker. And of course, some of the great role players over the past with their championship teams, guys like Avery Johnson, of course, Jaren Jackson, a little bit later, Steven Jackson, of course, Robert Horry, Danny Green, even though he's been inconsistent as of late. Danny Green was big for that 2014 championship team, the last championship team in the Popovich era so far, and I think probably most likely the last one. But more credit should have been given to the players. Most of the biggest reason why Gregg Popovich was so successful because he had the luck of having Hall of Famers and very good and all-star level players come through and win. And I think it's a lot of credence to the criticism that actually the Popovich system holds guys back. We saw just how, and we're seeing just how dominant a player Kawhi Leonard is when he has been let loose to do what he can do. In the Popovich system, Kawhi Leonard was a guy that was putting up maybe 17, 18 points a night, and was lauded much more for his defensive ability rather than his offensive ability. But now we see what Kawhi Leonard can do when he's not in the system. He's able to showcase what he can do and work on his overall game and not be held back. But yeah, I think now you can really see that Gregg Popovich has been slightly overrated as a coach. I think he's a very, very, very good coach, but I don't think he belongs up there with the Phil Jacksons, the Red Auerbachs, the Pat Riley's. I don't think he belongs in their pantheon. He belongs on a slightly, he belongs on a lower tier. He belongs more with, see, it's tricky because he's won championships, a lot of them. So people are going to say he belongs on that tier. But to me, he's more on the Red Holtzman. I'll tell you a good comparison to Gregg Popovich, in my opinion. I think a good comparison historically would be John Cundler. Now, I know that name might not ring a bell to many people, but John Cundler, who died just a couple of years ago at the age of 101. John Cundler was the head coach of those Minneapolis Lakers teams back in the 1950s that won 5 NBA championships. But I don't think anybody would say that John Cundler is among the greatest coaches of all time. That's kind of where I would put Popovich at. John Cundler was a very good coach, who ultimately decided not to stay coach of the Lakers because he did not want to move from Minneapolis to the Lakers, to Los Angeles, where the Lakers ultimately moved, I think in I think it was 1960 or 1959. He chose to stay in Minneapolis, and I think he coached in the high school and collegiate level. Like I said, he was a very, very good coach. But when you got guys on your team like George Mikan, the greatest big man of his era, when you have Vern Mickelson, when you have Slater Martin, you know what I'm saying, when you have Jim Pollard, when you have these Hall of Famers on your team, you're going to win. We see that with Steve Kerr when he has an actual great team, but when he actually has to coach, we can see that Steve Kerr is very mediocre. Now, I'm not saying Cundler is Steve Kerr, but you get the gist of my point here. Gregg Popovich, now that his best players are guys like DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, who are probably now closer to the downside of their careers rather than the prime of their careers. And also, another point I want to make, notice how LaMarcus Aldridge, when he was in Portland, he was putting up big numbers. He was putting up like 26 and maybe 9 rebounds or something like that. Remember, of course, DeMar DeRozan, when he was with the Toronto Raptors, he was putting up like 27, 28 points per game, scoring 40 and 50 points. Notice he's not doing that now with Spurs because he's playing in that goddamn system, all right? And it hurts your numbers. That's why I've said before, and I'll say again, if Tim Duncan was on another team, not playing for Gregg Popovich, or playing for another coach, he would be putting up probably like 28, 29, and 13 rebounds. He's been putting up Shaq-like numbers, maybe even scoring more than Shaq. But because he played in that system, he's putting up more like 22, 23 points and, 12 rebounds, which are still great numbers, but like I'm trying to say, it holds you back. David Robinson, before he started playing under Gregg Popovich, David Robinson was leading the NBA in scoring, or amongst the leaders in scoring. Now, some of it's because of the leg injury, but David Robinson's numbers went way down after Gregg Popovich became the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. So that's pretty much my point, man. I think now we're saying that Gregg Popovich is not the genius, not the all-time great coach. I remember there was a conversation one time. There was a debate about who was the better coach, Phil Jackson or Gregg Popovich, or whether he was up there with those guys and Pat Riley, and he's not. But even with those guys, there comes a time when you part ways. Pat Riley knew by 1990 it was time for him to part ways with the Los Angeles Lakers. And by the 94-95 season, Pat Riley felt like he could do pretty much all he could do with that Knicks team. And he parted ways and went to the Miami Heat organization, partially because he wanted more control. And he wasn't going to get the control he wanted with the Knicks organization. Phil Jackson, after a period of time with the Lakers, he needed a break. Uh, I think that it might be time for Gregg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs to part ways soon. Gregg Popovich is what, seven? He got to be in the 70s. Um, Maybe he doesn't gel right anymore with some of these new age players. We saw that some years ago with Jerry Sloan with the Utah Jazz when he was having this culture clash with guys like Deron Williams, and this isn't that wasn't John Stockton and Karl Malone. So I really do think it might be time for San Antonio to consider moving on from Gregg Popovich. Not that the Spurs are doing terrible, but by Spurs standards, they're not going anywhere. They're not improving as a team. Maybe they really do need to just totally rebuild and totally start over as a franchise because this isn't their team is really going nowhere. Um, they might not even make the playoffs this year. So that's pretty much all I got to tell. Pretty much say in this video, man. Tell me what you guys think.